I wrote my little girl's name on every single school supplies. Okay, so I'm a 31-year-old single mom to my daughter Emma, who's 8. Last month, I found out about this summer program at her school, where kids can go before the year starts to do fun activities and get used to their new classroom. Emma was super excited about it, so we went shopping for all the required supplies. Now here's the thing. At Emma's old school, kids would steal her stuff constantly. Her cute erasers would disappear, her good colored pencils would vanish, and she'd come home upset asking why everyone took her things. So this time, I wasn't taking any chances. I went full mom mode on those supplies. I used permanent marker to write EMMA in big letters on every single crayon, marker, glue stick, and even the individual pieces of paper in her notebook. I glued her name onto her clear backpack with industrial adhesive so nobody could peel it off. I wrote her initials on every single page of her sketchbook. I even carved her name into her pencil case with a knife. Emma thought it was fun watching me label everything. We made it into a game where she'd hand me each item, and I'd find a new spot to put her name. By the end, you couldn't look at any of her supplies without seeing Emma written somewhere. First day of the program arrives, and Emma's bouncing off the walls excited. I packed her labeled backpack, gave her a kiss, and sent her off. When I picked her up that afternoon, she looked confused and kinda sad. Turns out the teacher had made an announcement that all the supplies were going into a big communal pile to be shared equally among all the kids. The teacher said some families couldn't afford to buy supplies, so they were redistributing everything to make it fair. But here's where it gets crazy. When the teacher started sorting through the supplies and saw Emma written on literally everything, she got annoyed. She apparently held up Emma's crayon box in front of the whole class and said, "This is what happens when parents don't read the instructions properly," and made Emma feel embarrassed. Then the teacher called me that evening. She explained that they pool all supplies together because not every family can afford the full list. Some kids show up with nothing, and they don't want anyone to feel left out. I told her I understood the concept, but asked why Emma had to be humiliated in front of everyone. The teacher said Emma would need to bring unmarked supplies if she wanted to continue the program. So I had a choice: buy all new supplies and waste the money I'd already spent, or pull Emma out of something she was excited about. I decided to get creative instead. The next morning, I showed up at school with a bottle of nail polish remover and spent 2 hours in the parking lot scrubbing Emma's name off every single item. Other parents walking by kept staring at me like I was insane, sitting there with a pile of school supplies trying to erase permanent marker. Some items were easy to fix, but others were ruined. The backpack still had glue residue, the pencil case had scratches from where I carved her name, and half the crayons were worn down from scrubbing. When I brought the supplies inside, the teacher looked them over and said they were acceptable now. But Emma was upset because her pretty supplies looked damaged, and she was embarrassed that everyone saw her mom frantically erasing her name in the parking lot. Later that day, I found out from another parent that the teacher's own daughter was in the same program with supplies that had her name written on them in fancy calligraphy. When I asked the teacher about it, she said those were special circumstances because her daughter had severe ADHD and needed to keep track of her specific items. That's when I realized this wasn't really about fairness or sharing, it was about control and the teacher picking favorites. I decided to escalate things. I wrote an email to the principal explaining the whole situation and how my daughter was being treated differently than the teacher's own kid. I included photos of the damaged supplies and asked why some children were allowed labeled items while others weren't. The principal called me the next day and said they'd be reviewing the program's policies. Apparently, several other parents had complained about the same teacher making arbitrary rules and playing favorites. By the end of the week, the teacher was reassigned to a different program, and they brought in someone new who actually followed the school's written guidelines. Turns out kids were always allowed to keep their own supplies. The teacher had been making up her own rules. Emma finished the program happily with new supplies that had her name properly labeled on them. And the teacher? She got moved to working with high school kids who probably don't put up with that kind of nonsense.